Hello and welcome to this special edition of Warrior Maven, Center for Military Modernization. Very unique opportunity. Warrior Maven was invited to the Pentagon for a special interview with the Undersecretary of the Army, the Honorable Mr. Gabe Camarillo. Sir, what a pleasure to have you. It's really an honor. Our audience really wants to hear from you.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to be here with you today, and it's good to see you back in the Pentagon.
Oh, you too, sir. Bunch of things to ask you, sir. I know you have a pretty wide purview, but why don't we begin just in a general sense? What are a couple of your thoughts about major accomplishments? Because we track modernization real closely, the big ticket item programs. There have been some real breakthroughs. I mean, we remember the years ago where the Army was trying to do the network, and now it's pretty much here. So what are some of your thoughts on the biggest successes?
Start with one that probably doesn't get the most attention, and that's the Army acquisition community's support to our nation's COVID response. It should not be forgotten that one of the great accomplishments that our talented professionals contributed to was making sure that we supported the federal government's effort to contract for the development of the vaccines, the production of the vaccines, as well as all the personal protective equipment and other supplies to really help augment the nation's COVID response. So that's one near-term example. But I think to your point, how have we fared in terms of providing modernized capabilities to our soldiers? Coming back to the Army in 2022, after leaving it in 2015, I'm just blown away, frankly, by the shift that has been made and the momentum that really the Army has acquired in this area. So when I left, we were in the middle of counterterrorism operations in the Middle East, and our capabilities and our investments were kind of focused on that mission set. I come back as part of our national defense strategy, dealing with the pacing challenge of China and the enduring challenge of Russia as well. A completely different area of focus where the Army has prioritized the development of long-range fires, for example, other modernized capabilities that are really going to make a difference for us to be able to compete with threats in the future in large-scale combat operations, and how a lot of success in this area. I would attribute it to several things. The first is very flexible authorities provided by Congress in the middle part of last decade that allowed us to go fast, start prototyping efforts very quickly. I think a lot of work on the Army side to iterate on requirements and experimentation, very in close collaboration with the acquisition community. I think that's helped. And then, the next step is really going to be fielding these systems, and that's going to be the hard part over the next few years. I always say that we need to stick the landing on these programs, taking them from prototypes to a fielded system. But I'm looking forward to working with the team on that next challenge.
I remember showing up at the Space and Missile Defense Conference. They were RTTCO, I believe it is, right? They were talking hypersonics, and General Rush from PEO Missiles was right there.
Yeah.
How is that program moving? And I think I've written a little bit about how there's a misconception with all the hype about how far along potential adversaries are. It's not like the U.S. is out to lunch on this. I mean, there's some serious progress with hypersonic weapons with the Army.
Oh, absolutely. I think the department as a whole has made a pretty significant investment in this capability the last couple of years, and it is technology that was invested in many years prior. So we have kind of picked up where those efforts left off before. But I give a lot of credit to the Army RICTO organization that was previously led by General Neil Thurgood and is now led by General Rob Rash.
Who you're kidding me. I didn't even realize that.
He moved over from PO Missiles in Space, was promoted to Lieutenant General, and is now leading RICTO. So he'll be responsible for kind of continuing to take the long-range hypersonic weapon program to its next phase of success. And by all accounts, it is going very well. It is still meeting all of its marks in terms of testing and everything else that we wanted to do developmentally. And so we're working across the services. It is a common DoD effort, and I'm very pleased with the progress we're making.
That's excellent. Right now is such a critical time to sort of observe and write about the Army. I remember the days of FCS and then jitters and all these multi-year efforts to interconnect the force in real time in an informational way. I'm sure you've heard of system of systems with FCS. Well, now that day, in terms of sensor to shooter time and multi-domain connectivity, is here.
Yes, absolutely. It is the absolute requirement of where we need to be as a joint force. You've heard a lot of talk across the department about JADC2. The Deputy Secretary of Defense is really eager to make sure that we're pushing forward in the right way. And it's a combination of a couple of different areas. First, it's making sure that each service understands their contribution to that JADC2 capability as part of a joint force. And the Army is eager to support that. Whether it's being able to share command and control data at the right echelon with our joint partners and our coalition partners, whether it's making sure that we provide the transport requirements that are needed all the way down to the tactical edge to ensure that the network is there to move the data around. And then thirdly, I would say it's also ensuring that we can demonstrate interoperability of our weapon systems in those key nodes and at the correct right level to make sure that we do the right handoff with our joint partners and allies. And to that end, I think the Army has gone a long way to pursue that line of experimentation with Project Convergence. And there's a lot of great work done by, for example, I'll just point out the Next Generation Combat Vehicle Cross-Functional Team continues to experiment, whether it's with RCV prototypes, also working closely with the Futures and Concept Center about how those or how that capability might be employed within a heavy formation and what that means in future formations in the Army. All of that work is happening right now. And then at the same time, we know that data is going to be the coin of the realm in order to facilitate and enable autonomous systems in the future to work. So making sure that we've got the computing power at the edge and that we've got the network capacity at the edge to be able to facilitate that is going to be really important.
I'm so glad you said that. I recently spoke with the AFRL Commander, General Pringle, to connect with your Air Force time. And we talked a lot about AI. It's one of my favorite topics because I'm not sure that it's fully understood, at least in the common sense of it, other than, of course, an academic article or something.
Right.
But let me ask you this. I remember working for you, I wrote a lot about common operating environment and those interfaces technically between otherwise different systems and finding those gateways. That also must be a challenge to a certain extent as you look forward in terms of that interoperability, ensuring the security, but also finding that gateway that can translate, say, an RF signature into something wireless or into a data link of some kind. That has to be the key, especially the international connectivity.
Absolutely. As much as we can push the edge of the envelope on modularity and interoperability in the future of our systems, I think that's going to work great. I recall, 15 years ago when every individual application in our tactical network had its own laptop, had its own server, had its own, kind of everything organized for it. And I think that's obviously the direction we're trying to move against in terms of modularity and the ability to collapse our footprint.
Well, gosh, I think about AI and I think about what you oversee in terms of the interconnectivity and how much that's been paradigm changing. Something like Firestorm, you have 6 different sensor inputs and then it's processed, bounced off a data pool, and instantly potential solutions are presented to human decision makers.
Absolutely.
Where do you see that going? That has to only just continue to mature and be key with unmanned systems.
Absolutely. So again, I think it's looking at not just the pace of technology change, also how it's integrated within our formations. And then I think third, the concepts that it informs is really important. And I think that's where Army Futures Command can play a significant role, is ensuring that as we're doing this experimentation, we're learning how to employ these technologies and these capabilities in our units and in the way that we're going to fight in the future.
I want to call on your expertise and ask for a couple of things that are absorbing a lot of your time. But first, you touched on this a little bit. Heavy armor. I understand the optionally manned tank is conceptually being looked at. There's also consideration that there is a longer-term role for heavy armor. Just in a general sense, what's some of your thinking? You mentioned the AFC and some of the cross-functional team. What are some of your thoughts about how that's maturing?
Well, I mean, it's too early to say what the future of the Army's battle tank is going to be. But what I can tell you is that we are looking down the road. What are the investments that we need to make? What is currently the art of the possible? And I think as AFC continues to do experimentation through the NGCV CFT, we'll begin to extract some lessons learned. People have spoken a lot, for example, about lessons learned from Ukraine. It's just too early to tell. We're beginning to get those insights. I think it's too early to make any kind of snap decisions about what it means or portends for the future. And then I'd also say the Army's going to have a requirement to be, to potentially operate anywhere in the world. So I think that has to be a factor that we take into account.
Well, we're doing a special series, Air War in 2050, and I followed, Future Vertical Lift. In 2011, I wrote some essays for you on the JMRTD and technology development. I know there's source selection right now, so not a lot that can be said about the competition. But in terms of manned-unmanned teaming, future mission systems, potentially even some weapons, what are some thoughts you have about where you see air war, the Army contribution to the joint fight? It can be 2030, 2040, just looking forward.
Yeah, no, I think those are all the right things that we've been pushing on for a while. So as you know, we have the most capable, most advanced fleet of rotary wing aircraft anywhere in the world. But they are reaching kind of the edge limits in terms of their speed, their range, and size, weight, and power constraints on those platforms. So part of the modernization push is to enable us to expand that envelope of range, speed, and endurance to be able to achieve all of our requirements for lift in the future. I think our tech demonstrator program really helped to work with the industrial base to mature some of those technologies and capabilities. I think we're seeing the dividends pay from that, and I look forward to continuing to work with the CFT on those efforts.
No kidding. Well, gosh, sir, what are some of the main things that are consuming your time? I also really want to ask you about one of the things you hear from AFC and also from your leadership position. You're going to look at how technology changes maneuver formations, that there are newer senses of combined arms maneuver being examined when you have a more dispersed battlefield, when you have AI truncating that sensor to shooter time. What are some thoughts you have about how the two intersect, as you know, so both of them so well?
I think it's too early to draw conclusions about that piece of it. It is an exciting time to kind of think about those force design elements at this particular juncture in the Army. But I think what we need to focus on at this point is continued experimentation, continued assessment of where the state of technology might be. And then I think we need to think through as we design, look ahead beyond the Army of 2030. How can we incorporate those technologies and those capabilities into the formations of the future to enable us to be prepared to do what we've always done, which is dominate the battlefield?
I hear about senior leaders and previously working for them, they have to be 10 miles wide and 10 miles deep at the same time. So you oversee so much.
Yes.
So I have to ask, based on your leadership and expertise, what are a couple things that are taking up most of your time? What are some of your key priorities right now? I'm sure there are too many, but
that's a great question, Chris. And I'll say that most of my time, I'd say about maybe 65 to 70% of it right now, is primarily focused on the budget. Being an undersecretary of one of the services, you spend a lot of time in program review for the budget. So I sit in a lot of DMAG meetings at the OSD level every week, which is important because you get to kind of integrate what the Army is doing and our investments across what everybody is doing across the Department of Defense. So it's a very valuable and very, very important and significant process. But some of the other kind of nearer term priorities that I'm looking at, first and foremost, the Secretary has asked me to lead the implementation of the Independent Review Commission for Sexual Assault prevention, sexual harassment prevention in the Army. So I'm working very diligently with our teams focused on G1, MNRA, and TRADOC to ensure that we're implementing all of those reforms in a very timely way. And I'm very pleased with the progress that we're making, although we've got a long way to go to tackle that challenge. Secondly, I would also point out that audit readiness is a concern that we have had across the department for many years. I'm really focused in my first few months on this job to see about ways that we might be able to accelerate our progress to help us get to the end goal, which is achieving a clean, unmodified audit opinion. I'd like to do that much sooner than later, and I'm committed to working across the Army to tackle that very important challenge because it will help us identify where our resources are spent, how we can make more efficient and effective use of taxpayer dollars, and more importantly, understand how we can reprioritize in some cases, invest to areas of investment where we really need it.
Well, you saw the science and technology world up close, and I've been honored to show up at ARL to cover the Army and Air Force research laboratories.
Yes.
And how do you decide what gets the biggest budget push? Because everything's so important. But I recall from 10 years ago when working for you, S&T, research, R&D, was really, really critical.
It is.
Where do you see that now, and is that getting...
It still is. I mean, I think...
I noticed there's a strong budget.
Absolutely. I think every year the Army has been very consistent in emphasizing our S&T portfolio and preserving it. It is the seed corn in many ways of future capabilities, and it is a way to begin to reduce risk. You mentioned, for example, the JMR Tech Demonstrator Program, which was an S&T funded effort over many years to enable to work with industry to be able to refine concepts for what a future vertical lift platform might be. The dividends are paying off now in terms of what that investment was earlier in the future. And that's a very mature kind of applied technology, but all the way from basic research to applied technology or applied research, there's a lot of goodness to the investment that the Army is making. And I think we've gotten really good progress in terms of working across the department along those critical areas of technology.
What's another thing that's really a huge priority for you as you look across the budget in terms of modernization? Obviously, a lot of money's going toward AI, but then also acquisition reform and getting those harvestable technologies transitioned quickly.
Yeah, so I think on the tech transition piece, I think that there's a couple of areas that we're trying to look at in terms of handling that or tackling that challenge. I think first and foremost, it is working with our small business community that's involved in the SBIR and SITR grant program to ensure that as they're trying to cross that valley of death, that they find homes and programs of record where it's appropriate for them to do so. And I think we as an Army community can do an even better job of communicating what those needs are, so that as that innovation base thinks about where it can prioritize its investment, it's aligned to the things that we know that we're going to need into the future. Another part of it is in terms of modernization priorities. I mentioned earlier, we're going to make, in many ways, an unprecedented transition from programs that were started as OTA, middle tier, rapid acquisition efforts into a final configuration that will be tested, fielded, certified as safe and reliable and sustainable, that will ultimately be used across the Army. We're starting to see that, for example, with mobile protected firepower, which started out as an OTA mid-tier program and has now gone into limited production. As part of that change over, they are going to have to go through all of the ilities that you have to do on the normal program of record and making sure that the system is ready for fielding. So I'm really excited about that piece of it, because it is taking prototypes and turning them into actual systems that the Army will field and maintain and use in the future. So it's a difficult transition. We're doing it across a whole range of weapon systems, but we're starting to see that our planning for it has been sound. For example, I'll give you one example of that. On the RCTO, the Rapid Capabilities Critical Technologies Office, recognizing that their plan was to, in many ways, on the mid-range capability, on the long-range hypersonic weapon, for example, is to transition that over to PEO missiles in space. They've had a team from PEO missiles in space embedded within the RCTO program offices to ensure that all of their issues are accounted for a life cycle perspective as we're handing over that prototype over ultimately to a full program of record. So I think those are examples of things that we've been able to do very effectively to plan for the transition.
Well, sir, I remember we were at the National Training Center in Irvine, California, supporting Ms. Shu. You were the deputy by then, and someone had a love for cheeseburgers. It may have been Willie Coleman. And we drove an hour through the desert to, I think it was Carl's Jr.?
In-N-Out. It was In-N-Out in Barstow, California. I remember it very well. We had made a decision one evening to take the 40-minute drive to go to In-N-Out Burger. And it's really a function of the fact that it was 3 Californians that were there that had a hankering for some In-N-Out.
Oh, that's why. I also recall I wrote an essay for you about the armored security vehicle and some of the combat ops and the training that was going on there, which leads me to actually a question. How is training evolving now that technology is so different?
Absolutely. Well, it remains absolutely critical to our readiness levels in the Army. I think some of the changes that I've seen since I've come back is not only has there been a sustained emphasis on making sure that we're fully funding our training and readiness accounts, but I think a desire to kind of lean in on the technology a little bit more. So making sure that we are using more sensor-based assessments on within our training ranges to be able to capture data not only on system performance but on kind of what the units are doing at their levels. So I think combined, we'll get better insights, as part of the after-action review to make us even better and more ready as a force.
Well, gosh, I think last one.
Question.
Oh, okay. Oh, gosh, where to go with this? I can ask you about the Cowboys, sir.
Feel free. I'm happy to. They're 3-1. They're doing well.
But you were a diehard Cowboys fan in the days of Tony Romo about 10, 15 years ago.
Yes.
They're still a powerhouse.
Well, I wouldn't say the powerhouse, but hope springs eternal for us Cowboy fans that we're going to win our first Super Bowl since 1995. But I'm very happy that they're 3-1.
Last question for you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Our viewers and readers are really going to find great value in hearing from you. I guess my last question is one of my favorite topics that you touched on right away, JADC2, the importance of multi-domain interconnectivity. And at Project Convergence, or this interoperability within the Army, there's a lot of discussion about that being the Army's contribution. And you look at the Navy's Project Overmatch, I believe you would know, ABMS with the Air Force, from what I recall. And there's this large-scale synergy. That's happening to a much larger degree, at least from an observer's point of view.
Absolutely. I think the Army is fully aligned with the department's strategy for JADC2. We've worked very closely with all of the stakeholders, and the desire is to make sure that we work across the joint force to identify what data is needed, at what touch point, and where, and how do we move it around on the future battlefields in a way that's timely and effective. So our focus is on doing that, and we're going to continue to pursue experimentation and the hard work that it takes to, as I said, make sure that we've got the transport layer right to make sure that we can achieve the Army's contribution to the joint force in that area.
Sir, obviously you have tons of responsibility in your current job. I remember when you showed up at the Pentagon, we were together briefing Dr. O'Neill, the Army Acquisition Executive, and he turned to me and he said, "This kid," was introducing us to someone. He said, "This kid's batting 1,000," because I predicted what the reporters were going to ask. And then he turned to you, and it was just 2 words: "He's brilliant." I don't know if you remember that, but he said that flat out.
He's very kind. Yes, he was a wonderful mentor.
And everybody was saying that you would wind up becoming this kind of thing. So it's a
thank
pleasure.
you so
pleasure.
much, Chris.
Yeah,
I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And it's great to see your success, obviously, not only in the building, but outside as well. So,
Oh, that's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Looking forward to continue to work with you.
You too, sir. Well, sir, a tremendous honor for our viewers and readers. Thank you so much for your perspective and your leadership. Obviously, you have a very full plate. Obviously, the world's a complicated place.
Right.
Undersecretary of the Army, the Center for Military Modernization here at the Pentagon. Tremendous honor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great to be with you.
Thank you.